You hear someone like Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu back in February 2021 talking about Athens and Jerusalem as these foundations of Western civilization, sharing aspirations for stability, prosperity, security.
Right. It paints a very specific picture.
Exactly. A picture of like a united front. Okay, let's unpack this a bit. Because when you look closer, the realities, especially around Israel's own migration policies and its place on the world stage, well, it gets much more complex, full of contradictions, actually.
It really does. And that's our mission today, isn't it? To sort of pull back the curtain on that complexity. We're going to dig into this often contradictory relationship between Israel and Europe. We'll look at how those shared goals, security, prosperity, how they intersect, and sometimes, frankly, collide with the really pressing issues, things like migration, human rights, big geopolitical shifts.
Yeah.
We've gone through a lot of articles, research, our notes, trying to pull out the key insights for you.
And we think what we're going to illuminate today is a side of modern international relations that maybe isn't as well known. You're going to hear some surprising facts, some moments that really show how, what happens on one border can ripple out.
Absolutely. Unexpected ripple effects across continents, impacting so many lives.
So that picture Netanyahu painted, shared Western values. How does that actually square with Israel's internal actions, particularly around its own borders, its migration policies?
Well, that's where the contrast really hits you, isn't it? Israel's borders have, in effect, expanded, and its immigration policies have become, well, the sources describe them as draconian, and with widespread backing internally.
Draconian how?
Particularly in how it's managed tens of thousands of African refugees, mostly from Eritrea and Sudan. People fleeing really intense persecution. And the tactics Netanyahu's regime used, it's quite a list.
Such as?
Everything from, bribing, cajoling, to secret negotiations with repressive African states, South Sudan, Chad, Central African Republic, basically trying to get them to take refugees back. And often, these deals came with promises of protection that were, let's be honest, pretty much unenforceable.
Unenforceable promises.
Yeah. And there was even a point, the sources mentioned, where they considered forcibly returning Sudanese migrants.
Forcibly?
Offering them U.S. $3,500, but then also recruiting them into a Darfuri militia to fight against Sudan, with training initially planned for Ugandan soil.
That's quite an extreme approach. What about the people caught up in this? Do we get a sense of the human impact?
We do. There's the story of Robel Tesfahans, an Eritrean migrant. It really brings it home.
Tell us about him.
He spent 6 years in Tel Aviv. And he described facing just constant racism. He said Israelis look at them suspiciously, and he quoted the government saying bad things about us Africans.
And this wasn't just a feeling.
No. I mean, you had incidents like in 2018, one of Israel's chief rabbis, Yitzhak Yosef, calling black people monkeys in a sermon.
Seriously? Any repercussions?
None professionally, no. So Robel eventually took the $3,500 they offered. He lands in Rwanda, promises unfulfilled. His journey then took him through Juba, across the Sahara, Libya, finally the Mediterranean. He actually said, "I'm not scared of drowning. God decides my fate." It just shows the desperation.
Absolutely. Where did he end up?
He finally settled in Germany, but only after years of this uncertainty.
His story really highlights how Israel, as the source puts it, pushed back its borders, policy-wise, to accommodate this distaste for Africans.
Exactly. And you had physical barriers, too, like the wall along the Egyptian border finished in 2013, built specifically to stop what many called infiltrators. It massively slowed African arrivals.
And the official stance.
Well, you had then Interior Minister Eilert shaped in June 2021, openly committing to return these infiltrators. And the stats, they speak volumes. Fewer than 1% of Africans have ever actually been granted asylum in Israel.
Wow, less than 1%.
And here's the twist, right? This experience Israel gained managing its borders, especially, as the sources note, its years of experience over Palestine. This became a kind of blueprint, a key selling point for European border agencies.
A blueprint. That's a really interesting, maybe worrying pivot. What does this idea of the Palestine Laboratory actually mean for Europe, for agencies like Frontex?
It means, quite literally, that advanced Israeli technology, often technology tested in conflict situations, is being deployed on European borders.
Okay.
Take Frontex, the EU's border agency. They're using Israeli drones now. Specifically, the Heron drone, which is run by Airbus but made by Israel Aerospace Industries, IAI. It was tested in Crete back in 2018, operational with Frontex by May 2021.
Any other?
Yeah, also Elbit's Hermes drone. Elbit's another major Israeli defense firm. And both of these drone types, they have a history. They were used in Israel's wars against Gaza, going back to 2008.
And what can these drones do?
Oh, they're highly capable. We're talking flight times up to 40 hours. Thermal imaging cameras, AI for detecting moving targets, even devices to locate mobile phones.
So you're moving from patrol boats, which could potentially rescue people,
Okay.
to unmanned drones focused purely on surveillance. What does that mean for someone in trouble at sea? And where's the accountability?
Well, that's the critical shift, isn't it? It's not just technological. It feels like a fundamental change in approach, from an imperative to rescue, perhaps, to more of a cold, calculated deterrence. There's an economic researcher, Cher Haver, who put it very bluntly. He said, drones cannot rescue anyone, and they can only take pictures.
Right.
He even argued the real reason they're used is that the drone operator could always take his time, and the patrol boat will leave too late so that there was no one left to save.
That's a damning assessment.
It is. And it creates this huge technological imbalance. You have NGOs like Sea-Watch trying to coordinate with simple text messages.
Yeah.
While Frontex gets these, crystal clear real-time images from advanced Israeli drones. There's no doubt Israel is now a key player in Europe's border militarization, a policy that sources say really accelerated hugely after 2015 with the influx of migrants from Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan.
And what's the price tag for building this kind of digital fortress?
It's substantial. In 2020 alone, the EU announced partnerships worth about $91 million with Airbus, IAI, Elbit, specifically for these drone services.
Wow.
And you have to remember, Israel has dominated this market for a while. As of 2017, Israeli firms accounted for something like 60% of the global drone market over the previous 3 decades.
60%. So they have deep experience here. But what happens when this contactless surveillance, as you called it, meets the messy reality of people stranded at sea? Do Frontex's operational goals clash with, basic humanitarian concerns?
They certainly seem to. The evidence strongly suggests the EU's primary aim here is not to help those in trouble at sea.
So what happens instead?
Often refugees are just left to drown. Or they're placed in the hands of the Libyan Coast Guard.
The Libyan Coast Guard.
Right, who then take them back to detention centers in Libya, which, by the way, is widely considered a breach of international law, returning people to places where they face serious harm.
And the EU partners with them.
Yes, since 2016. And this is despite really serious allegations about the Libyan guards. Reports of them being drunk, using amphetamines, even being involved in people smuggling themselves.
How does Frontex coordinate this then?
Well, Frontex claims it sends coordinates of migrant boats to Libyan officers via WhatsApp, calling it emergency communication. They also share surveillance footage with the Italian Coast Guard, who then pass it to the Libyans.
But Frontex denies direct cooperation.
They do. They deny direct cooperation. But observers like Sea-Watch say that contradicts what they see on the ground. They note these EU-trained and equipped Libyan forces rarely answer calls or even speak English.
And Sea-Watch has documented some truly horrific incidents resulting from this, haven't they?
Yes, the stories are just devastating. Migrants being forced to climb ropes onto ships in dangerous conditions, people drowning from carbon monoxide poisoning below deck, or from chemical burns from fuel mixing with seawater in flimsy boats.
Awful.
And there was an incident in June 2021 where the Libyan Coast Guard was actually seen firing weapons towards a rubber boat full of migrants.
Firing weapons.
Yes. Sea-Watch calls this willful blindness on Frontex's part. They argue pretty convincingly that without EU aerial surveillance, the Libyan Coast Guard would be practically blind.
So the drones are essential to the Libyan interceptions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Frontex relies solely on this aerial surveillance. Critically, the sources note, Frontex never uses ships. That tells you sea rescues are just not their priority.
Did this cause issues within Frontex itself?
It did. There was significant internal dissent. It ultimately led to the resignation of its head, Fabrice Leggeri, and 2 colleagues in 2022. This followed investigations into covering up human rights violations linked to these practices.
So the EU is pouring huge amounts of money into this. What one report called a digital fortress. What does that actually look like at the border?
It looks intense. That figure, at least $3.7 billion since 2015. It's gone into high-tech methods to, quote, digitally and physically target migrants.
Digitally and physically.
Yeah. It includes training police in places like Algeria and Morocco, in sophisticated surveillance, spreading disinformation online, harvesting Facebook data. The Associated Press summed it up in June 2021. Post-pandemic Europe, migrants will face a digital fortress.
What kind of tech are we talking about specifically?
New deterrents like Digital barriers, high-tech observation towers, more steel walls, of course, but also sound cannons.
Sound cannons.
Yes, devices that emit incredibly loud noise capable of causing permanent hearing damage. Also, virtual border guard interview machines, and even AI lie detectors.
AI lie detectors. That raises a really important point, doesn't it? There was a European lawmaker, Patrick Breyer, who actually sued the EU over these systems.
That's right.
He warned, and I'm quoting here, what we are seeing at the borders and in treating foreign nationals generally is that it's often a testing field for technologies that are later used on Europeans as well.
It's a chilling thought.
It really is. It echoes that idea we discussed, Palestinians being the guinea pigs for Israeli surveillance tech. And now these methods are migrating, so to speak, to Europe's borders. How does this play out with personal data, like phones?
Well, you see Israeli surveillance firms, like Celebrate, selling digital data extraction tools globally to 150 countries, the sources say.
And they target migrant phones.
Yes, specifically to piece together their journey histories. Now, this practice might breach international law because there's often no real consent. Yet, Frontex has apparently developed guidebooks on how to crack encrypted apps.
While at the same time,
you have reports of Greek and Croatian border guards simply smash in migrant phones. A different tactic, same outcome, erasing their journey, their contacts.
And Frontex itself, how accountable are they?
That's a major concern. Sources describe it as a secretive body with little accountability. Between 2017 and 2019, they apparently held at least 17 meetings with lobbyists from 108 defense manufacturers.
Including Israeli firms.
Including Israeli firms like Shalat Optronics, Seraphim Optronics, and Elbit. And these meetings resulted in multi-million-euro contracts. They even renewed a contract with another Israeli company, Windward. They used maritime analysis tools to, quote, catch the bad guys. Founded by former Israeli Navy intelligence officers, backed by figures like David Petraeus.
So when you put it all together, the drones, the Libyan connection, the lack of rescue focus, what's the bottom line assessment of this whole EU program from a critical standpoint?
I think Salem Argani, the former Libyan justice minister, put it very bluntly. He said it's all about trying to keep European hands clean.
Keep their hands clean.
His words were, make Libya the bad guy. Essentially, he argued, Libya becomes the disguise for their policies, while the good humans of Europe say they're offering money to help make this hellish system safer.
Right. Okay, let's shift gears slightly and look at this entangled web of alliances focusing on specific European countries. Greece seems like a key player here, right? Geographically, but also militarily with Israel?
Absolutely. Greece is arguably the European nation most militarily engaged with Israel, and they are incredibly determined to seal their borders.
How do they frame that policy?
Well, the Prime Minister, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, talks about a tough but fair policy. Although he's also been quoted saying the goal is making life as miserable as possible for those who get through.
And the Israeli connection?
It's been steadily increasing since around 2013. Greece relies heavily on Israeli defense equipment and training. Companies like IAI, Elbit, Rafael, they've secured really large contracts for drones, helicopters, rockets, bombs.
That's a deep relationship.
So deep that in May 2020, an Israeli-Palestinian NGO, Combatants of Peace, actually wrote to Greek, Cypriot, and EU leaders. They warned them against military training in Israel, citing fears it could enable West Bank annexation.
Did it have any effect?
Doesn't seem like it. Israel, Greece, and Cyprus continued holding naval drills, deepening their defense cooperation.
You mentioned hypocrisy earlier. Where does that show up in the Greek-Israeli relationship?
Well, a striking example was in 2017. The Israeli embassy in Greece donated its Independence Day budget for medical gear to the Greek island of Chios, pitched as helping friends who help.
Okay, sounds charitable.
But at the very same time, Israel is helping Greece and the EU with the surveillance tech the drones use to reduce the number of refugees finding safety on those exact same Greek islands.
That is quite the contradiction.
And Greece has even set up a drone base on Skyros Island using Israeli-leased Heron drones. They were even used during those terrible wildfires in August 2021.
So Greece is essentially doing the EU's dirty work, using Israeli tech.
That's how the sources frame it. Constructing detention centers, carrying out these illegal pushbacks, over 41,000 estimated since 2020, and using technological innovations like those deafening sound cannons at the Evros land border with Turkey. Remember, those can cause permanent hearing damage.
What's the impact on the ground for refugees' rights in Greece?
It's bleak. A lawyer monitoring the Evros border, Evgenia Kuniaki, described the government's high-tech repression spending spree. She said, now, in Greece, refugees have no rights. It's the darkest period that I've seen as a refugee lawyer.
the darkest period. Okay, let's turn to Germany now, which presents a different, maybe even more complex picture, right? A curious historical milestone, as one source put it.
Definitely. Germany is seen as the most consistently pro-Israel nation in Europe, post-Holocaust. And it's Israel's biggest trading partner in Europe, too.
What drives this unique relationship?
Well, going back to that Palestine Laboratory idea,
Yeah.
for it to really thrive, it needs Western approval, right?
Yeah.
Beyond the U.S., Germany is seen as the biggest prize.
And Merkel played a big role.
Hugely. Angela Merkel visited Israel 8 times as chancellor. Even one of her final trips abroad in 2021, she consistently praised Israel, even when it wasn't embracing the two-state solution, always repeating that line. Israel's security will always be of central importance.
There's a strong emotional, historical component, too.
Absolutely. She spoke often about historical reconciliation, gratitude for Jewish life returning to Germany after the Shoah. The sources suggest a kind of trade-off. Israel helped Germany rehabilitate its image post-WWII, and Berlin, in return, grants legitimacy to Israel, even amidst the occupation.
And buying Israeli defense equipment fits into this.
It's presented that way, yes, as a way for Germany to kind of atone for its historical guilt.
But this unwavering support, it creates some really difficult, maybe hypocritical situations, doesn't it? Especially around criticism of Israel.
It really does. Remember when Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas visited Germany in August 2022? He accused Israel of committing 50 Holocausts. And the German establishment was absolutely outraged.
Right.
But as one source pointed out, it's the Palestinians living under occupation, yet somehow they are the ones expected to apologize.
And this pro-Israel stance has reached some extreme levels.
Some would say dangerous, even absurd levels. Look at Deutsche Welle, the German state broadcaster. They updated their code of conduct in 2022. Employees now have to support the right of Israel to exist, or they can be fired.
Wow. Compelled speech, essentially.
And then, after the killing of the Palestinian-American journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, German police banned a peaceful vigil for her in Berlin. They arrested 170 people just for expressing solidarity. One Palestinian activist, Majed Abu Salama, even alleged he was assaulted by police during the arrests.
That's incredibly heavy-handed. What's the deeper interpretation of Germany's position here?
Well, the Palestinian intellectual Tariq Beykouni put it starkly. He said, states like Germany have once again accepted Palestinians as collateral. Their oppression and colonization is a fair price to pay to allow Germany to atone for its past crimes.
A fair price.
And the American Jewish writer Peter Beinart also offered a critical view. He said, the Israeli government and its German allies have told Germans that because their ancestors murdered Jews, they must defend the Jewish state. That's analytically and morally wrong.
So, pulling these threads together, what does this all mean? We're seeing this paradox. Rising anti-Semitism across Europe, over 3,000 incidents recorded in 2021, up 29%, blamed largely on the far right and Islamists.
Right, and at the same time, rising Islamophobia, too. Over 600 incidents in Germany alone in most of 2020.
How does this tangled situation connect with Jewish identity in Europe and public opinion?
Well, zooming out, you see that for a majority of European Jews, things like remembering the Holocaust and combating anti-Semitism are absolutely central to their identity.
Understandably.
But there's also anxiety. The 2018 EU survey showed 41% of young Jews had considered emigrating because of security fears. Almost half, 45%, avoided wearing anything that identified them as Jewish in public.
That's significant. And their connection to Israel versus the EU.
Strong attachment to Israel generally, but quite low support for the EU itself. Interestingly, though, actual immigration from Western Europe to Israel remains relatively low compared to Eastern Europe.
And Israel's immigration goals?
Well, someone like Naftali Bennett, when he was PM, talked about attracting immigrants from the U.S., South America, France, which, the source notes, is kind of a direct rejection of non-Western immigration, highlighting what it calls deeply embedded racism.
And this complex picture, is the worsening anti-Semitism arguably linked at all to Israeli actions in Palestine, like we saw spikes during the May 2021 conflict?
It's a really sensitive point, but some sources definitely suggest a link. The May 2021 Israel-Hamas conflict did see a surge in anti-Semitic attacks globally. It underscores how crucial and how difficult it is to distinguish legitimate criticism of Israeli government policy from actual anti-Semitism.
Absolutely crucial. And what about the disconnect between European public opinion generally and Israeli views?
Yeah, there's a definite disconnect there. European public opinion, particularly in Western Europe, has been steadily turning against Israel. Favorability dropped significantly in places like Britain, France, Denmark after the 2021 Gaza war.
But Israelis feel differently.
Yes, polls show a majority of Israelis believe they share values with the EU and want cooperation. Now, it's not uniform in Europe, of course. There's a segment of Europe's right wing
Right.
that really admires and backs Israeli actions in Palestine. They support its ethno-nationalism, its hard line against Islam and refugees. They're keen to buy Israeli tech and get inspiration from its methods. Netanyahu actively cultivated those alliances. Hungary, Slovakia, Poland, Czech Republic.
But that's not the majority view in Western Europe, is it? Didn't Pew Research find support for accepting refugees in many of those countries back in 2018?
Exactly. Pew found citizens in Britain, France, the Netherlands, Spain, Greece, Italy.
Yeah.
Many actually supported accepting refugees.
So what does that tell us?
It leads to the conclusion that the EU's quite brutal policy to keep refugees out, often using Israeli tech, really didn't have clear public backing in many of these EU populations. But that EU narrative, the clash of civilizations idea, pitting Muslims and black Africans against a supposedly more civilized European majority, that narrative finds a receptive audience in Israel.
And fast forwarding to today, the war in Ukraine.
That's only deepened the EU-Israel relationship, especially on defense. Germany's massive $100 billion defense budget increase. It includes armed Israeli drones, Israeli anti-missile tech. Other NATO states are buying Israeli equipment too. As one source bluntly puts it, war is hell, but clearly it is good for business.
Good for business. This deep dive has certainly uncovered some really profound contradictions, hasn't it? This shared vision of Western values sitting right alongside these increasingly harsh border policies, security interests seemingly trumping humanitarian concerns, historical atonement leading to these incredibly complex, morally fraught alliances.
It really has. And if we try to connect this to the bigger picture, it does raise a pretty important question for you, our listener.
Yeah.
Given how deeply tangled national security, economic interests, and these powerful historical narratives have become in the policies we've just explored, what do you think this means for the future? For international human rights, and even for how we define a border in a world that's supposedly more connected, but feels increasingly fragmented?
That's a powerful question to leave people with. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. We definitely encourage you to keep exploring these critical